All right, and we are back on Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Steve, how you doing today, bud?
Oh, it's a wonderful day. There's always something to talk about when it comes to football and the Patriots. So, it's almost time for the draft, which is
That's right.
favorite.
Draft season is upon us, which is what I
That's
have
it.
labeled the episode. We are inside the 4-week period. I am absolutely pumped. I have been doing a lot of my normal draft prep that you and I do every year for the last decade, but this year I've been having a lot of fun with different mock draft simulators. Have you used any of these sites yet?
Yeah, I've used like 3 different ones, and they're all a little different, and the boards, the way they break down, are obviously different, which makes it interesting because you never know how the board will actually break down in reality. So it's kind of nice to play around with it and see how each of them play out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm having a lot of fun with that. I was reaching out to some of my Twitter followers earlier yesterday, and people were sharing their different ideas, and it's fun. I've been tinkering around with what we talked about a little last week, which was Patriots maybe moving down a little bit in the first round, adding some ammo in the middle rounds to kind of move around the chessboard a bit. But we're going to talk about a bunch of things today. We are going to start off with the Jabril Peppers signing. The Patriots locks him up to a 1-year contract. So we'll talk about that addition, touch on Robert Kraft's comments briefly, but this is the first show that we've done this offseason where we're going to start breaking down prospects. We're going to do wide receivers and offensive line today. Next week, I'm sure we'll get into some of the defensive guys, probably a front seven and a secondary show as well. And then we'll do our mock draft, of course. We'll touch on all these prospects as we kind of go. But Steve, let's start off the bat with Jabril Peppers signing a 1-year deal with the Patriots, base value of $2 million. He was drafted by the Browns in 2017, was traded to the Giants in 2019, and tore his ACL last October. So he'll be ready to go probably for the start of the season. Not sure about OTAs or training camp or anything like that, but just talk about him from strictly on the field. Give me your opening thoughts on what he brings to the Patriots team.
Well, he's kind of an intriguing dude. I mean, has done a lot of different things for the Cleveland Browns, and I think the Patriots signed him with the intention they're going to use him like a mobile chess piece, a lot like he was used in different places. So, part of me that says, well, they already have McCourty and Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar. What's the purpose of the signing here? It made me think, and obviously we're still very early in the process, when it comes to team building, but it could be that Bill is going to flood the field with a lot of safeties this year. I mean, could we see 3 or 4 safeties on the field at the same time? I think it's possible now.
Yeah, I believe you're right. And honestly, I think that's kind of the way that Bill is going to attack this. He always likes to play with, the big nickel. He's been doing that for 2 decades where he brings a third safety in and like dime packages and things like that. I think we're going to see a lot of dime from the Patriots this year. And if they do that, it will lead to kind of an interesting discussion that I'll put off to the side for a moment. But I do think that with the guys that you mentioned, they have a lot of different players that they can move around, guard slots inside, power slots, what they're calling like those move tight end pieces now. Kyle Duggar's been played a lot in the box last year, close to the line. You could see someone like Peppers, I think, blitzing. McCourty, I still think, will play that deep middle field, Steve. But Adrian Phillips, all these guys, it's putting athletes on the field. And look, John Jones tweeted it out not too long ago, and I don't know if he was alluding to something or if it was just a random comment, but he was talking about positionless. In terms of like football, you hear that term a lot the last couple of years in basketball as like the NBA and the college game moved to a lot of wing play. I wonder if the same thing could be happening in the NFL, or maybe this is the beginning of it where they say, you know what, we don't need to have traditionally these type of positions here. Why don't we instead just get the best athletes on the field? And when you're having problems finding linebackers, for example, that can cover and blitz and do all these different things, I just think Bill is kind of just adding pieces. And I'm not sure if he knows 100% what he wants to do, but I think he just, in his mind, he wants to get as many athletes on the field as possible so they can get more athletic, but not lose the physicality that he wants his defense to play with.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And the other thing is, I think he can be a returner if he's completely healthy. I kind of, at first I was kind of, on the fence about this, but the more I think of it, the more I kind of like it. We'll see, obviously, what the rest of the moves are going to be, but I kind of like the move.
I do as well. And, for everyone listening right now, and, we are recording live April 1st. No April Fool's jokes today, Steve, because I'm good. I saw Julian Edelman have some fun with that, and I was like, no, I'm out. But we are recording live April 1st, Friday, 3:40 Eastern. We'll obviously post this to our podcast. Do not forget to subscribe if you have not already. And please.
Well, see, this is my April Fool's joke. Is like I'm not really at Foxborough.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Neither am I. I'm not in Foxborough either. I'm pretty far away, actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty far away too, but I'm projecting myself there. So
there you go. Well, another projection we're going to make is obviously we're going to do our draft prospect breakdown. We're going to start that later in the show. We're going to get to Robert Kraft's comments here in a quick second. And the other thing I wanted to do is that if anyone kind of clicks in, if you want to send over any kind of draft question, Patriot question, shoot them off. We'll try to get to a couple of those later in the show. But real quick, Steve, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Robert Kraft's comments at the owners meeting in Florida this last week. He talked about basically how, he's a fan first. And I thought he came off, it really did sound to me, I should say, like it was coming from a fan. And he was just talking about how he hates that they haven't won a playoff game in a couple of years. And I think that the time to win is now and things like that. And I don't know what your first reaction was. I know that the Boston media, of course, took a match and lit it on fire. What else is new? To me, I didn't think it was as dire as maybe they were making it out to be in their hyperbolic nature. But I did think it put a little bit of pressure on Bill. At least my initial thoughts were that. Obviously not to fire him or anything like that, but I do think that Robert Kraft has been frustrated. He mentioned the draft specifically, and they had several years of poor drafting, and he thinks last year was good, and they kind of spent a lot of money to try to make up for some of those misses that they've had, and how important drafting is to team building, which I am 1,000% in agreement on. Give me your thoughts on what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was a little frustration. I don't, I'm not going to take it to where a lot of those other guys did, where, is Bill on the hot seat? And then, they're having polls. How bad a season will it take for Bill to get fired? I mean, to me, that's ridiculous. But
right.
I don't think he's going anywhere. I just think, after 20 years of sustained success, Kraft is, he's a little upset that they've gone 3 years without winning a playoff game, which,
right.
They haven't done.
Well, it's simple as that. And that, what, honestly, I think it's kind of funny. And we've talked about this word. I've used it multiple shows in a row. Expectations. I think a lot of people had the expectation that whenever Tom Brady left, even going back to several years ago, that at some point, this was all going to kind of come to a head, right? Where the team was getting older. They were going to have to reset a quarterback. They were going to have to flip the roster. And that's what's happening right now. They tried to make a succession plan with Cam. It didn't work out. Then they spent a lot of money and drafted Mac Jones to kind of help the offense. It's the defense's turn now, in my view. And I don't think it's a one-season fix, but I'm also not super upset about it. I told you, last week, I don't even care what positions they draft in this class, because the most important thing is that they are good football players. That is number one, because this team needs young, affordable talent. And they need to build along that. And that's what this offseason is all about in my eyes. It's about building talent. And The draft is a great way to do that. Really the only way to get these young players with coming out of college and to help your team be successful long-term, drafting successfully will do that for you. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that or if you want to just get into the breakdown.
Yeah, let's just jump into breakdown.
All right.
And a shout out to Ian Logue, who just texted me that he's watching this. So
cool. What's going on, Ian? How are you? But let's get into the wide receivers, shall we? So let's just talk about this draft as a whole real briefly. The draft class as a whole, there's some really talented guys at the top. But as we've talked about, the meat of this draft, 2, 3, 4, if you do some of those mock draft simulators like we talked about, Steve, to start the show, you start doing some of those on a regular basis and you realize, man, there are some really good guys in this middle, class. But obviously, the big ticket names are at the top, and there are some big time receivers in this class yet again. This is like the 5th or 6th straight year where this wide receiver class is absolutely loaded. And, as we've talked about on previous shows, well, the Patriots, while their main needs are probably more on defense, let's not forget that receiver is still a need on this team, in my opinion. Who do you like most in this class? Forget if they would fall to the Patriots. Do you have someone in this class that you would really, really like?
Well, I think everyone who's been reading anything I've written recently would know my draft binky for this class is the kid from Alabama, John Mechie. I would love to see Mechie in a Patriots uniform. I think the chances of them being able to grab him are real. Most people think he'll either go in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think 2nd is probably more realistic. And that's with the realization that, he might not be bringing anything to the table in 2022. But he's the guy I really like. I think he would fit with what they like to do. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's dynamic when he gets the ball in his hands. And I really think that they have a shot at bringing him in.
Yeah, I think Mechie in the 2nd round, maybe even 3rd round. I think I've seen some projections where he could go in that range. I think he would be a great fit and what the Patriots need. And, at the top of this class, you talk about Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, Drake London from USC. Doubtful either one of those guys fall to the Patriots, I would say. It seems like both of them are probably going to go in the top 10. We'll see. This is the time of year where everybody's a first round pick, and there's no way this guy can get out of the top 20. But only 20 guys can go. So I would say for me, Steve, we're going to go through a couple of names in the 1st round, a couple in the mid rounds, and a couple we like later. My favorite receiver in this entire class will probably be either Chris Olave or Jameson Williams. Now, different circumstance, different players. Okay, Jameson Williams, certainly a name that a lot of Patriots fans are familiar with. Tore his knee up at the national championship game. I know he's walking and starting to do some movements, which is great, but he's probably a guy that will be on the shelf, until at least midway, if not later into the season. You might have lost him for the whole year, but this is someone who would be a top 10 pick and probably the first receiver taken if he hadn't gotten hurt. Really explosive, a ton of speed, a fun player to watch, really kind of fits what today's NFL offenses are looking for. But for me, and obviously the Patriots could use a lot of that, right? They could use some explosive talent and some speed on offense. But someone like Chris Olave, for me, Ohio State receiver, would be a tremendous fit as well, because Chris Olave, for one, he ran faster than most people thought he was going to, but he plays all over the field. He's a great route runner. And to me, I just feel like he's the type of player that could come into this offense. He wouldn't have to be the one right away. The Patriots have other receivers, but he could get a role and then build on that from there. What do you think about Chris Olave and anybody else that you want to discuss?
Well, he's a great route runner, and I think that, he can run at all 3, I guess, levels of the field. He's very good in the short, the intermediate, and the deep part of the field. And you're right. I did not think he was going to run as fast as he did.
Yep.
And I know a lot of Patriots fans were hoping that they would go wide receiver in the first round, and a lot of people were kind of hoping he'd be there at 21. I think after his combine performance, I think that the chances of him being at 21, I think, went down quite a bit.
I agree. His combine definitely helped him make some money. I would say he is a realistic option, but there's no guarantee. And
right. I think prior to the combine, I thought the chances of him being around at 21 were pretty good for the Patriots if they wanted to, go for a wide receiver at 21. Yep. I just I'm not that confident that he'll be there now. And the other guy, Jameson Williams, who you mentioned earlier, he's kind of in the same boat with Mechie. He tore his knee up in the national championship game, but boy, you talk about explosive. And, once he kicks it into that high gear, he just leaves cornerbacks in the dust.
Yeah.
And he had, I believe it was 11 touchdowns of 30 yards or more last year. I mean, when you're talking explosive, that's unbelievable. But, he's in a different boat, obviously. I think he's still going to go in the first round. But again, if you're going to bring him in with a first round draft pick, it has to be with the realization that he might not play this year.
Yeah, which is tough, which is really tough. And Bill Belichick has talked about how damaging it is to young players to miss that early OTA minicamp session. And some of these guys we're talking about, that would be the case, right? So that's really definitely concerning. And, that's why, the talent level is there with them, right? Chris Olave, for me, if I go back to him real quick, really clean player. You watch him, really smooth. He can create separation all over the field. And that's really what Mac Jones needs, Steve. He needs someone who can separate and get open quickly. And, the Patriots really could use a slot, a really true slot. Jacoby Myers is a good, solid player, but he's not the athletic profile for what this offense really needs to become more dangerous. Okay. And so Olave is certainly in that range. One more name I want to throw out to you in the first round, and someone I really, really like watching, is Penn State's Jahan Dotson. Smaller player, very quick, kind of, one of those guys that can make you kind of miss in a phone booth, Steve. But someone who can get open quick, can make a play after he catches the ball. He can catch the ball down the field. He has some of the best hands in the entire draft. Some guys just look different when they catch the ball. Dotson just snatches it out of the air. It looks like DeAndre Hopkins. I know they're different kind of players, but some guys just catch the ball differently than others, and you see that with Dotson. And you could see him going deep. You can see him going shallow cross over the middle. You could see him going on slants. I just love the way he separates. I just think his explosiveness could be an intriguing element in the slot for the Patriots if they go that direction in the first round.
Yeah, and again, the one, factor each one of these guys that you mentioned has is the yards after the catch, and it's something I think this offense has lacked the last couple of years, and it's something they really need.
Yep.
Dotson, like you said, he's a hand catcher. He doesn't let the ball get into his body. He seems to snatch it out of the air, and he's got really quickness, off the line where he gets open immediately. Something you mentioned as well. He creates separation right away, and once he gets the ball in his hand, he has that speed to break away, and he really drops the ball. I think he's another guy. I think if you're going to draft him, I think it would have to be using a first-round draft pick.
Right, and I think Dotson, to me, very realistic chance that he's there at 21. I think that's right where his sweet spot starts. Will be 21. I could see the Packers someone like the Packers getting him at 22. I could see him going late into the first round. I can't see him getting out of 3-4 picks inside of the second round. I just think he's too good. He's going to go into that 20 to 35 range, Steve, in my opinion. But if the Patriots move back and collect, a second or third round pick, say they move back 6, 7 spots, 8 spots, and they can pick up someone there, I would have no problem with that. Again, I'll go back to something that I said in a previous show. I really, really like these guys that we're talking about. I would love Olave or Dotson on the Patriots. Jamison Williams, Garrett Wilson. All those guys would be great players. I also could make a pretty strong case that the Patriots should go best player available. I don't care what position it is at 21, and then you can get a receiver in rounds 2 or 3, like we're going to talk about some guys here, and maybe that just helps you make you it's a better football team when you have the best players available, and that's Bill's philosophy. That's Ozzie Newsome. The moment a team starts drafting on need alone is usually where they take a big swing and miss. And I know that Bill's not going to do that, but it's a hard process for these NFL front offices to. They're rating all these players, right, Steve? And then they're stacking their boards, and then they got to figure out, okay, is it going to be are the Patriots going to take Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College, or are they going to take Jahan Dotson, like we're talking about? And that's a decision that's why it's a tough job to have, Steve, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that all falls out. For me, second round guys, I love several of these players. George Pickens from Georgia. I'll start with him. Just a really fascinating player. For me, he has size. He has speed. He has a little burst. He has good hands. He has an incredible catch radius. Really can make some explosive plays. I think that Pickens, for me, obviously there was an injury issue with him, but he seems to be back now. I think he recovered pretty quickly too. And you just see it when you watch Georgia, and Georgia was on a lot of channels this year with them being so good. I just feel like, for me, he just sticks out, and he just seems kind of like a guy that you want to go to war with. He plays with a lot of energy and just kind of he almost has like that badass defensive back attitude. You know what I'm saying? So I love the way he plays, Steve. And I think in the second round, hit someone like him, John Mechie, who you already mentioned. I think both of those guys could be fun players in the second round and good options for the Patriots.
Yeah, Pickens, all those guys from Georgia just seem so athletic at the combine, and yeah, there was that injury concern, but I think guys are recovering from ACLs a lot better, in the last few years than probably they did. So I wouldn't be.
Yeah, Pickens tore his ACL in the spring last year, and then he was playing at the end of the season. That's crazy. It's not what it used to be. That's for sure. Not that it's not a concern, but it's just much better than it used to be.
Yeah, Pickens, Mechie, who we mentioned. Do you think Treylon Burks from Arkansas would be available in round 2?
It's tough because he tested really poorly, at least for a receiver. He is. You have to qualify this with Treylon Burks, right? He is basically. He kind of reminds me of almost like an Aaron Hernandez type, but like a little bit more athletic. Because he's big. He's 225. But I could see a team like the Patriots being interested in someone like him because you can move him around and he can do so many different things. But he did test poorly, so people, I think, are going back to the film and wondering. But if you watch him. If you watch him, you would say, man, he's really pulling away from a lot of these other players, right? He stands out. His play speed doesn't worry you. His time speed does. So that's where these evaluators are going to have to make their decision. I am not someone who would take Treylon Burks in the first round. I just don't. I don't like him enough. There's a lot of guys that fit the athletic profile that I think this Patriots team needs, and I just don't think Burks is one of them. And if he was available in the second round, we can have a conversation about that. But I still look at someone for the Patriots are going to go for a receiver. I think they need to target someone who's going to be able to get open quick and add a little bit more speed, a little bit of, has a little more twitch to him. And that's why I mentioned Olave and Dotson before and left Burks to the side. What are your thoughts on Burks? And would you take him in the first round?
No, I wouldn't. There's just, they went this route a couple of years ago with a bigger guy that they thought, had all this separation.
Right.
I think they might be a little gun shy about doing that again.
Do you think they're gun shy about taking a receiver in the first round in general after that?
I tend to doubt that they're going to. That's just their MO, that they usually don't do that. A couple of years ago, I was surprised that they did that. So I'm kind of thinking they're not going to do it. Is it completely out of the realm of possibility? No.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I don't think they
I would love to be a fly on the wall and see their draft board.
Mm-hmm.
But, because I think, like you mentioned at the outset, I think they're going to go best player available, and the best player available on their board will obviously depend on, who they value the most. But I just don't see them going for a wide receiver in the first round. There are some guys, that I would love to see if they decide to do that. And another guy you mentioned earlier, Garrett Wilson, is another one of those kind of slot guys that I think would be really, really good in this offense. I just don't know whether he'll be around for them.
No, I think, honestly, Steve, I think I'll be shocked if he gets any farther, Garrett Wilson, than 10 to the Jets. I really just can't see him going much farther than that. Mm-hmm. And someone like Drake London from USC, again, I'll put him in that same category. I've seen some people compare him to N'Keal Harry. He's way more athletic than N'Keal Harry. And look, N'Keal Harry had some good tape in college, but there was a lot of questions about him being able to separate athletically, heading into the combine, and he ran pretty well, and it pushed him into that first round. But there was a lot of question marks around that, and I don't get the exact same vibes with Burks. I think Burks is a little bit different. I think he's gonna be a better player too, but I don't know. I just don't think that's what this offense needs, Steve. I just don't. If we go into the second round. We've talked about Skye Moore from Western Virginia. Are you still high on him? Where do you think he shakes? Because to me, I really, really liked him early. Then it seemed like everyone started to really like him. Yeah. And then I started seeing him in like fringe first round conversation, and I was like, that's too rich for my blood. Yeah. If the Patriots took him in the second round, if they were to trade back a little bit and they get him late second, early third, I think that's a good range for him. I'm just not taking him in the first round. Tell me a little bit about him, if you and what you feel about him as a player.
Well, he's another guy that I liked early in the process. 3-year starter, really good production, and we talked about this so many times. That the kind of guy that thrives in this offense is that slot guy, has very quick, very sudden off the line of scrimmage, really good footwork. He can get away from press coverage really well. He can, he plays at a good speed, and, he knows how to work the field. He's not afraid to go over the middle, and he'll do the dirty work. But I would not take him in the first round. Even round 2, I think, is even a little rich. I thought he was a third round kind of guy. But since the combine, his draft stock is skyrocketing because, like you, I was reading about people talking about him now being, borderline first rounder, and I don't think he's that guy.
No, I think that some of that. Sometimes I feel like when people are doing mock drafts, and I'm not criticizing anybody. Mock drafts are fun, right? But sometimes I feel like it's like people have like a bug in their ear. They feel like they have to put players up high because of they're a little prisoner of the moments, and I get that. But to me, I look at Skye Moore and I think he's a really intriguing player. I could see him as a good fit here for the Patriots. Just I'm not taking him until the second round, at least, and even then, and even in the second round, there's several other players that I would put ahead of him, like Mechie, like you talked about. And to me, like that, Mechie is a really intriguing guy for a lot of reasons, and you talked about it. He did tear his ACL like his teammate Jameson Williams, but it was earlier, so his timetable is a little bit more ahead, which is nice. And his value, Steve, right around that pick at 54, for the Patriots, I think would be pretty solid there. So if they did go best player available, let's say they go with a cornerback that falls, or a linebacker, or an offensive tackle in that first round. Well, if you take a pretty, one of those kind of, top 3 players at their position, at one of those positions I just listed in the first round, and then you swoop back over and you get John Mechie or somebody in the second round, you're off to a pretty freaking good start. So he's a fun one. Do you have anybody in the later rounds that you like?
I haven't watched a ton of tape, but I've heard some people talk about Khalil Shakir from Boise State.
Yep. And in fact, I want to say it was either Matt Groh or Bill Belichick. It was one of them who was kind of keeping an eye on him at his pro day the other day.
Yeah, and again, I haven't watched a lot of tape of him. I don't watch a lot of the guys from out west as much,
Yep.
but everything that I've seen about him, he kind of, he fits that bill. He's smart. He's very instinctive. He even played, I think, some Wildcat quarterback. So, and he's another one. He plucks the ball out of the air. He doesn't let it get into his body. And, he can play special teams in return. If he's a guy that's around later in the draft, I would be intrigued to see what they could do with him.
Yeah, and I think that he's someone to keep an eye on. I know Bo Melton from Rutgers is another name that's been popular in Patriots drafts, and I think for good reason. I mean, he's he has a lot of bloodlines to Rutgers. His family, both his parents, I believe, went there and played sports there. He had a brother that was there. He's a senior. He was a 2-time captain. Has a good amount of athletic ability, but he's not. It's not, I would say, like outrageous, but he's probably like a lower end receiver and someone who can contribute on special teams. But that's what you're looking for, in a late round pick. Just someone to kind of keep an eye on. Before we get into the offensive lineman, our friend Damien says hello. So hi, Damien. How you doing, buddy? I figured I could get in on that. Let's go to another position that I think is really, really interesting, and it definitely could be an option for the Patriots, and that would be offensive tackle. Where do you think this ranks, Steve? Because it's tough. Left tackle, you have Isaiah Wynn on his 5th-year option, last year on his rookie contract. Really up and down player. If he could just stay a little bit more consistent, it would feel a lot better, because when he's good, he's solid, and when he's bad, it looks really bad. And I do think he gets killed a little more than he probably should on social media sometimes, but such is today's world. But at the same time, I don't think he's quite lived up to the player I certainly thought he was going to be coming out of Georgia. And then on the right side, you got Trent Brown, who's been really inconsistent in terms of health. Missed half the season with the Patriots this year, but when he's out there, he's an animal, and he's great. So to me, it's tough. I look at it and say, is it an immediate need? No. But I would say they should still need to probably find a veteran that could step in if one of those two cannot play. But I certainly think that taking one in the first round is certainly not off the table. Taking one in the mid to late rounds as a developmental prospect, I think, is a must. And they need to try to have a long-term plan for their right tackle, because I don't think Trent Brown is that guy. And who knows what they think of Isaiah Wynn past this year. So who do you like at the top of this draft? We can leave out the big three, Steve, of Evan Neal from Alabama, Charles Cross, and Ike Ekwonu. Okay, those guys are all going to be long gone. After that, is there someone in the first round that you would think could be an option for the Patriots?
If I was going to draft a tackle in the first round, it would be one of those guys, and I just don't think that any of them would be available. So honestly, I can tell you, I would not take a tackle in the first round unless one of those three guys was available. I just, I don't think that they would opt for any of the other guys, because I just don't think. I think there's some good tackles out there, but at the same time, are they worthy of a first-round draft pick unless you're talking about those top three? I don't think so.
Yep. And I tend to agree with you. There are some guys that I like in that kind of – I think that they will be reaches in the first round, but could be if they move down a little bit, to the second round, or even if their second-round pick at 54. There are some guys that I like. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, I think, is an interesting player. A lot of size. I would say he's probably the next best tackle, in my opinion, after those guys. I know that there is a couple other guys that could be in that conversation, but to me, I'd probably put him there. I don't think he's ready 100% right away, but he's someone who possesses a ton of size at 6'7" and 325. And we know they've liked some of their bigger tackles in the past with Fulmore or Soldier or whatever. Or Solder, excuse me. For me, I think he's an option in that second round. There's two guys that I really, really like, and it's Tyler Smith from Tulsa and it's Abraham Lucas from Washington. Now, pretty different players. I'll start with Lucas. For me, when you watch a college team that has like an air raid or pass happy, offensive attack, you have to have tackles that can pass block. And Abraham Lucas is an excellent pass blocker. The problem with him is that he struggles as a run blocker. He's needs to get a little bit stronger in that category, which is why I kind of see it as a perfect scenario for him to come in behind Trent Brown, behind Isaiah Wynn. Maybe you can get him groomed in, get him coached up, and in a year or two, you could slide him in. He has a ton of pass pro reps in college. He's an interesting player to me. And I do like the edge that Tyler Smith brings from Tulsa. I definitely like both of those guys in that, that conversation. I'd put them in that second, third round range. I think Tyler Smith won't get out of the second round. I really like him. Abraham Lucas, I'd like him more in the third, but beggars can't be choosers. Is there anyone in the middle rounds? If you don't have anyone, that's okay. I just was throwing it out to you.
Yeah, I like Tyler Smith too. I mean, he's another big dude. I mean, 6'6", 335. He plays with that mean streak. He's a violent run blocker, which they like. Especially like a guy like Trent Brown. He can move guys around. I think he's got a solid anchor. I like him. In that area. If you're going to draw back maybe a little bit more. There's the kid from Kentucky, Darian Kennard, who I think, they could see him as a guard or a tackle.
Yeah.
He's kind of
like him more guard personally, just throwing that.
Yeah, I think he'd probably be more of a guard, but he's got good size. He was their guy in the running game, which I liked. When you watch Kentucky, they ran behind Darian Kennard all the time. Now, that was as a tackle, but if you slide him inside to a guard, I think his footwork, which needed a little bit of work, wouldn't be as big of an issue, and I think he could step in and be that versatile guy where if you needed him to slide out at a tackle, for a game or two, he'd be able to do that.
Yep, and I agree with that. And I would also say two other guys I'll mention. Max Mitchell from Louisiana. I kind of like him in that 4th, 5th round range. And then the other guy I'm going to mention too is Zach Tom from Wake Forest. And this is going to be a day 3 guy. And I like to mention a couple of these later round guys just for the sake of, not everyone's going to go high. And I would draft an offensive lineman, at least one, in every single draft, regardless of what my offensive line looked like, because you just need developmental prospects there. They have liked the Wake Forest, program with players from the past. They've drafted a former offensive lineman in Justin Herron. I could see Zach Tom there. Someone for me personally who has been durable, who's been deemed a really smart player. I've never sat down with him or spoke with him, but everything about his draft profile says he's a smart player. He's played at center. He's played at tackle. He's fluid. He's not the biggest guy. He needs to develop. I just think with the previous, connection to Wake Forest offensive lineman, just someone to keep an eye on for that later round. Anyone else that you want to mention for offensive tackles?
As I know you mentioned the kid from Northern Iowa. I like him.
Yeah.
Also, what's his name? Drawing a blank right now. Bernard Rainman from Central Michigan.
Yeah, but that's another one. There's another one that a lot of people seem to like, and for some reason I just don't. Thank you for bringing him up because I meant to.
Yeah, to me, not as a top round kind of guy. In the middle rounds, if they wanted to go with him, I think that would be a good move.
Yeah, I just don't know where he's going to go. It seems like he's going to just go a lot higher than I'd be willing to take him personally. And I like Penning more. I like Tyler Smith more. You could convince me after that he could probably slot in, but I just feel like he's going to be a little too rich for my blood. That's all it is for me. I do think this tackle class is interesting. I don't think the Patriots will take a tackle in the first round. I think that somewhere in that 3rd, 4th range is where I start to think I would put their radar up from them. I still think they're going to go someone on defense in the first round. That's just my gut feeling. And then I could see them going, their first 3 picks, I could see them going like a receiver and 2 defensive players. I don't know what positions on defense. Then you could start talking to me about the offensive tackle, or interior lineman position. And look, we're going to get into the interior lineman right now. Okay, I'm getting the hang of this. I'm finally getting the hang of this program here. I've made fun of Russ for so long about him seeming so distracted, and honestly, this is my first day hosting with the video. And hi to everyone who's listening live, and thanks for joining us. But for me, it's like there's all these buttons and everything going on here. I'm trying to read these draft notes that I've written down. I got Word documents and a bunch of screens open. So I can see why Russ struggles at times, but he does it much more gracefully than I have. So Russ, I bow to you, sir. Anyway, we're going to get back to the interior offensive lineman now. Let's get into that quickly, and then we'll take a break and we can answer some draft questions. I have gotten a couple of them, and if anyone who's listening live wants to send in a draft question, send it in, and I'll make sure I answer it for you. But Steve, we're getting into interior offensive lineman now for the Patriots. Let me just say this: there are probably 2 to 3 guys in the first round that I think will qualify as first rounders for interior offensive linemen. I do think the Patriots have an obvious need at guard with the Shaq Mason trade, with losing Ted Karras to free agency to the Cincinnati Bengals. But I don't know, Steve. You tell me if I'm crazy. I just feel like it would be a real kick in the groin if they trade Shaq Mason for pennies on the dollar to clear cap room for this year and next year, only then to draft a guy in the first round. I mean, you tell me how you would feel.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. I mean, I don't know the draft board, but it wouldn't play into how they do business. It doesn't fit their MO to do something like that. Now, not to say there isn't worthy guys out there. It's just, Shaq Mason, I thought was an outstanding guard. His cap hit was high, but I think, for them to turn around and sell, or not sell him, but trade him for a 5th round pick and then draft a guard in the first round, it doesn't make any sense for me. So, and Bill doesn't do things very often that you scratch your head and try to make sense of. One of the guys that's on the roster that I'm kind of intrigued with seeing is the kid they not drafted, but signed from the CFL, Drew Desjardins. He was a first round.
I couldn't say it.
Yeah, he's a first round pick, granted in CFL, 4th overall though. And he was a 2-time All-Star in 3 seasons. He won 2 championships there.
Yep.
They signed him. Well, his team released him because he wanted to go to the NFL, and he had offers from 12 different teams, and so he took the Patriots. He had interest from 12 teams, I should say, not offers. He had interest from 12 different teams. He's a guy that I want to keep my eye on this summer and see how he transitions. But at the same time, I don't see the Patriots. I think they will draft and probably sign an undrafted free agent, from the interior offensive line. I think they're going to definitely add some bodies there. I just don't see it in round 1.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Actually, our friend I remember Mike Diabate posting a story about him when they signed him to a futures contract. And he is interesting. I mean, he's from Canada, like you said, highly drafted in the CFL. He did have a lot of interest, and he's just someone who, obviously the CFL talent, NFL talent are incredibly different. Doesn't really even need to be said, but I do think that's someone who you can kind of just say, it's just kind of one of those guys that just pique your interest, right? This just maybe dog tier him a little, or, and just kind of wait until training camp and see what happens. To me, there's several guys who are off the top, Steve, I'm just going to get into that I really like in this class. I'll start out with one that I was kind of wrong about, and I'm going to take a penalty lap for. Tyler Lindebon from Iowa. I thought he was a center guard coming into the process. The more I read, the more I watch, the more I listen to people who are much smarter than me. Seems like he's just too small to play guard. He's going to be a center only. I do really like him, though. I think he's a phenomenal player. Patriots don't have the need at center. If he can't play guard, like a lot of people are saying, then I just think you can take him off the board there. The two guys that I think are in play for the Patriots in the first round or early second, if they were to go this direction, not saying they will, but if they were, would be one guy from their own backyard and Zion Johnson from Boston College, and the other one is Kenyon Green from Texas A&M, who's really, really shot up some draft boards lately, and there's good reason for that. I'll table Zion for a second. Okay, I'll let you speak to him a little bit more. But for me personally, Kenyon Green, really fascinating player, has played over 100 reps at 4 different offensive line spots. So he has a lot of versatility, a lot of experience. He's got good size. He's someone that really, when you talk about, guys with a lot of experience who are really versatile players, that's someone that's going to pique Bell's interest every single time. And on that offensive line, it's important to have those qualities. And so I think that Kenyon Green could certainly be I don't think the Patriots are going to take an offensive lineman at 21. But let's say hypothetically they trade down 21 to like 34, where the Lions have their third pick in the draft, because that they have 2, 32, and 34. Let's say the Patriots go back to 34, Steve, and they pick up several middle round picks. Okay, and they're trying to push all their chips into like the 30 to 100 range. I could see them taking a guard at that point, where you could plug and play someone. But I'm not expecting that to happen. Any thoughts on that, and your thoughts on Zion Johnson from Boston College?
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at all my notes, and they're like all over the place. I agree with you. I think Kenyon Green is probably the top guard in the draft. I actually have him above Zion Johnson. I know he's
wow.
I know he's a local guy, and there's a lot of interest there, because they would love to see him come in. I just don't see them doing that in round 1. But Johnson's an intriguing, he's an intriguing guy. He's another versatile guy. He can play tackle. He can play guard. I think he's more of a guard in the NFL because of his size. But you talk about a guy that's productive, and he's very strong. He's great in the running game. I think, if you were going to take your first pick on one of those two guys, I don't think you'd miss. I think they would be around for a long period of time, and they would be very productive for you.
Yeah, I think Zion Johnson, I wish he was a tackle, but he's an interior lineman. Okay, but I only say that because it's just really hard to stomach taking an interior offensive lineman in the first round, just because of the position. But I agree with you. Zion, to me, is such a clean prospect. He's got a great size. He's strong. He has played a couple different positions. He's a team captain. He's gritty. I would be, if you're talking about like high floor, players, Zion Johnson is a high floor player. And I think he has a high ceiling too. I absolutely believe that Zion Johnson could be one of the best interior linemen in the league some point down the road. I feel that strongly about him. Again, it goes back to the conversation the Patriots are going to have to figure out. Are they going to, are they going to target someone on the offensive line early? Will he be just so highly rated on their board potentially that it makes more sense to take him than someone on defense? I tend to not, I tend to not believe that. But again, I think whoever drafts Zion Johnson is going to get a good player. To me, Steve, is there anyone in the middle or later rounds that you like? We don't have to go crazy. It's just centers and guards. And the Patriots are obviously, we do think they have some kind of need at guard. But is there someone that you like later, not a first round prospect?
I haven't really thought about some of the guys later in the, maybe in the mid to late rounds. Maybe a guy like, I was looking at. I'm trying
while you're getting
he's from
here.
North Dakota. I'm trying to think of how to pronounce his name. Matt Waletzko, I think
yeah.
A third rounder. I mean, if third or fourth round, if they're going to go that route in the third or fourth round, I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, I'll take your word. I'll take your word for it.
But he's another big guy. He's like 6'7", 320. You know, he's a really big guy, and he would fit that profile the Patriots like, big road graders, and I think he would, he would fit that bill for them.
Yep. I'll mention two guys here, and let me flip over to my notes here because I got some comments I want to share afterwards. And again, hello everyone who's listening. And if you have a draft question, send it in because we're going to get to that in a second. But I'll share some comments in a second after I talk about these two players. The first one I want to mention, Steve, someone later in the draft that I really like, and I feel like you really can't go wrong taking as many players from Alabama and Georgia as you possibly can. Yeah. This offensive lineman from Georgia, Jamison Williams. I really, really like him as someone in the later rounds. 6'3", 320. He's played. He's taken snaps at all 5 spots. He's got a really big, broad frame with long arms. I think for a guard, I'm not sure it's someone who can go in and step in right away, but it's somebody who I really, really have kind of liked. Marquise Hayes is another one, but to me, Marquise Hayes is probably someone who's going to be a little later than someone like Jamison Williams. So if Salyer's going to go in the 4th, 5th round, maybe someone like Marquise Hayes is going to go. Excuse me, I thought I was going to sneeze. Is someone who's going to go probably a little bit later. The other guy I want to mention here is Cole Strange. I don't know if you're familiar with all with him, Steve, but for me, he's someone that keeps kind of just popping up. And I've seen more and more about him over the last couple of days, and he's an interesting player. So for one, he's from Tennessee, Chattanooga. He's 6'5", 307, so he's tall for a guard. But I think that when I watch him, I just see someone who is going to translate over. His game translates to. I put him and Salyer in that same conversation where you can get a good player in the 4th, 5th round. I think Strange might go a little bit higher, maybe the 3rd round, but in that 3 to 5 range, call it. You can get someone like that where, they're not going to start for you necessarily year 1. Potentially they could, but you're looking more for down the road. And I like both of those, or all 3 of those players that I just mentioned.
Yeah, Strange is and he has a great name. I mean, that would just, he would just he'd be an automatic fan favorite with his name. So, yeah. But those guys. And
look,
go ahead.
I was going to say, as Chris chimes into this comment, just draft guys from the SEC. I would tend to agree. Okay. He also says that you have a nice background, Steve. People are commenting about your background. But
I'm actually not standing there right now. I would love to be standing there right now.
I would love to be standing out there with you. I agree. And look, we got Russ Goldman chiming in.
That's from the old media workroom above the practice field.
Yeah, that shot. Yep, absolutely.
I took that several years ago.
And there's doing so much construction around the stadium right now. It's crazy. I'm excited to see it when all it's done. But Russ chimes in, and he's talking. He's not a fan of the draft talk, but he says we're doing great work. So I guess we'll take that with a grain with a grain of salt here.
I'm surprised he can listen. He's probably at work right now, so
yeah,
he's probably playing hooky from work.
His ears are burning because he heard. You know what it is? He tuned in exactly when I praised him. And he was looking to see if pigs were flying, and then he tuned in and left a comment. That's why he complimented us back. There's only one explanation. But so we went through receivers, offensive linemen. Honestly, we're gonna go through so a lot of defensive guys next week. I don't know what your schedule is. Maybe we can even do 2 shows and do a front 7 and a secondary where we go through some of these players because that's the kind of direction I think they're going to go. I am starting to really think they're going to go defensive back in the 1st round. That's just me, and we'll get to that in a little. We'll get to that next week, and then we can touch on the receivers. I'm sorry, the running backs, the tight end, the quarterbacks. Those to me are last priority, Steve, and that'll be a shorter segment because I do think the Patriots could draft a quarterback, but it's not going to be high. I could see them drafting a tight end, but I don't really see the need for it. Running back, maybe. Well, those guys are going to be later. We're going to start with the fun stuff. We're going to scrape the vegetables to the side for this year, and we're going to focus on the fun stuff.
And we've been talking, about what they would do in the 1st round. I really think they're going to go defense in the 1st round. I just have that feeling. you can convince me. And again, a lot will depend on how the board plays out. But if you were to tell me they would take a cornerback, an edge rusher, or a linebacker in the first round, I would be all on board with that. Of course, depending on who the name is, but I think that's probably where they're going to go. But
yeah, and I do want to get into a couple of things real quickly because we are getting to the end of the show, I would say. And don't forget, people, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts. But with draft season so close, Steve, I figured I would reach out and ask a couple of, ask if anyone had any kind of questions for us today. And if you're listening back now, please feel free, send it over to me or Steve. And if you have a question for the draft, send it over and we'll read it on next week's show. We have a couple of them, nothing crazy. Again, if you're listening live, feel free to send it over. I'll start with our friend Claire. And Claire writes in saying, will they take a tight end? Obviously, I'm joking. I know your answers. She says, seriously, where do you see them ideally filling the offensive line gaps at tackle and guard round-wise, and who's caught your eye at both positions? Well, we already really answered that question, but I think for me, I'm going to say if they go offensive lineman, it will be at the earliest third round, and I think they'll address it more in the fourth and fifth rounds, if I had to guess. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I think that's a good spot for them because honestly, I mean, they have both of their starting tackles back. They still have Justin Herron, who was their swing guy last year.
Yep.
So, although they need to build for the future there, obviously, I don't think it's a burning need for them unless someone was to fall in their lap. And,
yep. I agree.
And we've seen stranger things happen before. But to answer Claire's first question, I know we chuckled at it. I don't think they'll take a tight end, but will they add a tight end? Maybe an undrafted guy. I could see that happening.
Well, it really just depends for me, Steve, on a couple of things. For one, we know that they're going to want to use, Smith and Hunter Henry, as like their priority guys. And Smith has to get better. Bottom line is Jonnu Smith has to be a part of the offense, and he has to be better than last year. And I think they're going to try to find a way to make that happen. We talked about Jonnu Smith potentially being an H-back role. I think that's someone they drafted a couple of years ago, and Dalton Keene, who was hurt last year. Do they see him as a potential H-back, or where do they see him? And, they also drafted another tight end. Help me with the name. I'm sorry.
Devin Asiasi.
Yes, thank you. From UCLA a couple of years ago. They picked him in the third round. I mean, so they have guys in that system already. I don't see them necessarily adding one. If they do, I could see a late round priority free agent type, and they'll throw him on the practice squad because tight ends are so versatile. There's, and it's a hard position to learn, so it could be a developmental, thing. A couple more questions here. Chris asks, are you surprised Stephon Gilmore is still a free agent? Yes, I am a little surprised because there was so much reported interest, I should say, from the Cincinnati Bengals and the Oakland Raiders early that I thought that it would happen a little bit sooner. I think what's happening here is those two teams and whoever else is interested for Gilmore, I think that offers are on the table, and it's probably just not – Gilmore's just not being blown away from a money standpoint. So I think he's just saying, you know what, I'm going to wait and see if someone comes late. And at this stage, I would be a little surprised if Stephon Gilmore signed before the draft, Steve. Because I think what happens is, as soon as free agent opens, all these NFL teams, they run out and they try to fill up some of these holes and target some of these players, and that's where the big money goes. Then it slows down a little bit, and you'll get a trickle here, trickle there. But then what happens is you look at, the draft and try to get that young, affordable talent. But the board falls a certain way. And let's say you have a need at cornerback if you're the Raiders, and you end up getting a really solid cornerback. Well, now your interest in Gilmore is not as strong as it was. But if you're a team like the Bengals and the board doesn't fall your way, well, now you're going to increase your offer to Gilmore to make it happen. So I could definitely see a scenario like something like that happening. What about you, Steve?
Absolutely. I think, once the initial feeding frenzy was over, like you said, I don't think he was blown away by any of the offers. So he decided to play the waiting game. And it can work for or against you. But once the draft is over, if, like you mentioned, some of these teams that need a corner, if the guy that they covet wasn't there, in the draft, then like you said, they'll up their offer. They'll bring Gilmore in, and he'll be playing probably for a contender.
Yeah, I'll ask you this question too, because he sent in a bonus question, and I have two others, and we'll get out of here. Chris said, should the Patriots consider drafting Matt Ariza in day 3? He's the punter from San Diego State. Everybody's in love with this kid as like this punter is going to be drafted. Where's he going to go? For all I know, Bill's going to take him in the 3rd round. I have no idea. I think, though, it's an interesting situation because you have Jake Bailey, who was really, really good 2 years ago. Last year, very inconsistent, struggled mightily in several games. Now has gotten a little bit more expensive with some of his escalators. And I don't know, Steve, what do you think? Would you draft a punter in day 3?
Yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if Bill takes him in round 6.
Yeah, I could see something like that. I could definitely. I'm never going to say no because I think at that position, I think Bill. We know how Bill values special teams, and when you're a punter and you can, field position is so important, and Bill put such an emphasis on that when you're talking about. When you're talking about someone like a punter who can flip field position and pin guys in a certain area or get you out of a bad, if you're inside your own 10 and you need to get the ball to the other side of the field, you need to be trustworthy. Bailey, I think, will rebound, but I would not be surprised if Bill drafted a punter or brings in, at the very least, some competition to kind of push him a little bit, just like he did with Quinn Nordine and Nick Folk in that whole situation last year. And he's done that a lot in the past, back to the Zoltan Mesko days, going way back. So, I mean, for me, I wouldn't be surprised. Let's see, a couple other questions here. Let me just find one. Okay, our friend Darius writes in, and Darius asks, sorry, got all over the place here. Would you rather Bill trade down and take a cornerback receiver or stay put and take a guard? So the question is, stay put at 21 and take, a Zion Johnson, take Kenyon Green, someone like that? Or would you rather them take down and take a cornerback or a receiver? I would rather the cornerback or receiver trade down all day long and twice on Sunday. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, especially if they trade back, and pick up another 2nd or 3rd round guy. I would be all for that. Yeah. And, after what happened with the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, the Chiefs are now they have 2 first-round draft picks. They lost Tyreek Hill. They're behind the Patriots, I think, at 27 or 29. Mm-hmm. Could they slide up if one of those wide receivers is there that they covet? And then, sweeten the pot for the Patriots because the Chiefs have 2 picks in round 1, round 2, and round 3. So they have a lot of draft capital to play with. So I'd be all for that. Sliding back a few picks.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe next show, just for fun. Is there a way on this? I've never, like I said, people listening, so I apologize. There's a way you can share screens, right? I can share my screen live. I think we should F around and do a mock draft live for our next show sometime next week. It could be a whole debacle. We'll see, but it could be fun. It could be fun. Yeah, we can talk about different scenarios. But I agree with you. I think trading back somewhere I don't want to go much farther than like 34. Okay. But I would like to still keep the first rounder personally, especially if you trust that you're getting a good player. That first round, remember, you get the 5th year option, and that is huge for teams. Okay. And that's why you'll see teams maybe trying to trade back in at the end of round 1 if someone wants to get a quarterback late, because that 5th year option is really, really important. We've talked about the Chiefs. I think trading back 6, 7 spots, if you can somehow finagle another 2nd round draft pick in there, I think that's a huge win. So that's what I would be trying to do if I was the Patriots. Steve, last question here for you. Tweety asks, well, we kind of just answered this. So maybe we're ahead of the curve here. What's the farthest you would like to trade down in the 1st round if the Patriots do that?
Yeah, I would trade back, but not out of the 1st round. unless
I really would like to stay in that first round.
Yeah,
If
unless
the
somebody
haul was
really,
really good, if the haul was really good, 34
really sweeten the pot.
Yeah.
You know.
But here's the thing, though. I want a lot of draft picks. You know, if someone, let's say, for example, someone offers you, you go, Detroit wants to move up, and they're going to offer you their second round pick and like a second round pick next year. Well, anytime you get a second round pick or something like that in future years, that's great ammo. I would also argue, Steve, and I just feel like the Patriots need to bring in young guys. So in past years where you're a contender and your needs aren't as high, I think that you can push ammo to future years to give you more flexibility. And you can, be a little more aggressive and package up a bunch of picks and target like one player, like a Bills or, like where the Bills are right now, and they can move around and take one player. Right now, the Patriots have a lot of different needs. So I want to try to basically move down just a hair in the first and get a little more ammo for the middle round, and maybe even use some of those later picks so you can move up in certain spots and target guys that they like. Because in my eyes, if they can come away with 4 players that can contribute, 3 on a pretty regular basis, I think that you just hit the jackpot. Last year, you got it. It's a little different because of Mac Jones, but you got it in Mac Jones, Christian Barmore, Ramondre Stevenson. If you can find some kind of trio like that for this year's draft, Steve, now you're really cooking.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They have to hit on their draft picks this year.
Yeah, 100%. It's a must. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up the show now.
But before we go, I just wanted to share with everyone the show obviously is being broadcast live right now, but tomorrow it'll be on the PatsFans.com YouTube page, and it'll be available tomorrow. So we encourage all of our readers and listeners out there, if they happen to miss the show, they'll be able to see it tomorrow right there.
Perfect. I love it. And that's we've been getting a lot of talk about YouTube and things like that. So I think people will be happy to hear things like that. Any final thoughts, Steve, on what we talked about today before I sign us off?
No, I mean, I just think this is my favorite time of year. I think this is there's so many possibilities out there, and it makes for great, war gaming of how they're going to build a roster. I always think it's fascinating. And like I said, I would love to be a fly on the wall and see their draft board, which is usually a lot smaller than any other teams.
Yeah, I would just say this. There's the offensive linemen. We talked about a bunch of them. I do think that they could go that direction, but I know that people really wanted to talk about receivers, and we talked about a lot, gave people a lot of options. There's a couple guys that I'm sure I forgot that are on my list, but I have like 6 different places I have notes right now, so I need to be more organized for that for the future shows. But if I think that there's definitely some receiver talent for whatever you're looking for as an NFL team. You will find a receiver for what you want in this class. It's kind of like Baskin Robbins, pick your flavor. Whatever you want, you'll find it in this class. And I do think the Patriots will target a receiver early. I would say somewhere in the top 90 picks. Okay. I would like it to be in the second round, but I could see them even going third round. And I still think you can get a quality player there. But we're going to talk about defense next week. And I'm really excited for that. We'll post we'll post the show as soon as we can, and we'll be going live next week as well. Now that I have gained access to this, so we can be back live, because I know that we enjoy doing it live for some people who can tune in and comment, and it's better than just the podcast version. But to sign us off now, Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and on the YouTube channel for Pats fans, and we'll see you guys next week.